On today's episode, we're going to answer the age-old question, what makes a true fan? And then we're going to answer another age-old question, what is canon versus legends? And of course, we're going to be talking about whether or not Dave Filoni should be president of Lucasfilm. And we're going to be taking your questions in our segment Q&A. This is Dyad in the Force. What's up, everybody? My name is Element. I am your host.
And I am Darth Chaco, the co-host here on Dyad in the Force. And I'm stoked because, we had an awesome episode of The Mandalorian to talk about.
Yeah.
But we just have some good topics. Some interesting stuff has been happening in our little universe.
Yeah, definitely. Before we start, I just wanted to right off the bat kind of just say, like, I think I'm up to chapter 20 or so in the first Thrawn book, and this has been like one of my greatest regrets as a quote-unquote lore master, is that I haven't gotten into Thrawn until now, and I figured now is as good a time as any because it's new canon and they're continuing it, and everyone's interested in Thrawn because of the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a resurgence of interest with Rebels, because they were like, oh, who's this? Everyone seems to know him. But I gotta say, Eli Vanto gives me huge Ezra vibes.
Okay. I can see that. I can see that.
And when I think of like the possibility of like a Thrawn showing up in The Mandalorian, I'm just like, every time I read like another chapter of this book, I'm just like, this is how they would be if like they survived and had some kind of life together. It's just like Thrawn is just like his lips pursed, his muscles tense, a vote of confidence. And then Ezra is just like, what is he doing? Like, he's trying to learn from the master. And I just had to say that. I don't know if you have any comments about it, but just like, I am absolutely enjoying this book. And Space Sherlock is definitely the most apropos name you can give him. I thought you guys were joking when you were calling him that.
Yeah, not at all. I had people in my comments call him Space Ben Shapiro, and I'm like, no. It's the exact opposite of that. Like, that's Arinda Price is like Ben Shapiro.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, I agree.
The thing that makes me most excited is that the way that we see Thrawn kind of training Eli Vanto to recognize and to think more strategically. That means that Ezra could potentially become my favorite character of all time if he comes out of this as a skilled Jedi with that mindset. Oh, goodness.
There's a lot of implications there.
Yeah. I mean, Thrawn is, and I did love him in Rebels, but I've been a huge fan of him since the EU days. In a book form, he's so good because it explains his thought process and what he's seeing, and like how he can see a little bit into the infrared spectrum. So he sees, okay, this person that, like, he sees heat on their face, he knows that they're making something up. And that inner dialogue is so key to the character that, yeah, in book form, he's amazing. I can't wait till you're all caught up and we can do some deep dive Thrawn stuff.
Definitely, like, episode in the future, man. When especially when I reach Chaos Rising, definitely gonna do like a retrospect of the trilogy and then where it is now with that book. Definitely his insights and his inner dialogues with himself would be completely lost unless they did like an actual Sherlock Holmes version show with Thrawn. You know, I'm thinking about like the Sherlock show that they did on CBS with Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu. Mm-hmm. Definitely if they did a Thrawn show, or if they included Thrawn in like Mandalorian or a show with Ahsoka, I definitely think they need to explore like a multi-perspective type of deal where he's not the villain. Well, he would be like a big bad in a sense, but he's not the villain where we only see him doing villain things. Like, it would show like Ahsoka's perspective, and then we would shift over to like his perspective and see things from his eyes, and then we would hear his inner dialogue. We would see like flashes of what he's seeing when he's, you know, when he's going into detail about people's like muscle twitches and their facial expressions and body language. Definitely have to treat it like that.
And that's really where Star Wars is at its best, in my opinion, and why I love the books and things so much, because there's always multiple threads happening simultaneously. It's not like there's only two factions. There's usually 3 or 4 different factions, and different people have different goals, and so alliances can change and things like that. But yeah, for anyone who's watching this who hasn't read any of the new Thrawn books, highly recommend them. And yeah, I can't recommend them enough. They're excellent books. Timothy Zahn came back. This is his character, and so I love that he is creating it. I will say that the books, just read them in release order, because the actual order of the books is insane. So yeah,
especially if you take into account the Legends books. But I think it would be easier for most fans of today to just start on Thrawn, like the new canon one.
Yeah. No, but that's what I mean. To start with the new canon, and read them in release order. Okay. Like for instance, the first book, Thrawn, is his start in the Empire. The second book is 2 missions, one further back in time with Anakin, and one present time with Vader, and that takes place right after season 3 of Rebels.
Oh geez.
And then the third book is right after that, but Chaos Rising happens. The entire mission with Anakin happens during the Chaos Rising book.
Really? Is there like some crossover there, or?
There's not really crossover. You only get, only the very beginning of it crosses over, and he goes down to the mission, and you stay in the ship that he left with the pilot, and they come back, and he doesn't really talk about it. But it was just fascinating to me that mission from the second book happens inside of the first book of the second trilogy.
Yeah, so you're saying not chronologically. Yeah, not right. It's confusing to go back and forth.
Exactly.
Okay. So going into our first topic of this episode, what does it mean to be a true fan? Now, obviously the foundations of the Star Wars TikTok community shifted. There was a shift. There was a disturbance in the Force the past week. Of course, I refuse to give this person any kind of platform. So, but the idea is, he made a video stating, if you don't know who Revan is, you're not a Star Wars fan. You just watched a couple of movies. And just right off the bat, before we go into this discussion, you're a fan if you love Star Wars. That's
if you're watching this right now,
you're definitely a fan of Star Wars. But okay, so this raises a lot of questions. It's like, shouldn't really matter how much you know about something. You know, it all comes down to whether you enjoy it or not. Like, I have friends and family and uncles and aunts that watch this stuff because they enjoy the cinematic experience of it. But every time they watch it, they're going to be like, who's that again? Like, what happened here? And so it's like, I'm not sitting there and be like, man, shut up. You should know this stuff, you know? I don't know. What's your take on this? Like, this notion?
I mean, just like you, I didn't give that person the platform. I just made my own video talking about it. And then this is just the past repeating itself. When the prequels first came out, it was a new Star Wars for the next generation of Star Wars fans. And that's why there was so much hate for the prequels. It's because there's all these, OG original trilogy fans, and there's these new fans jumping on, and these new fans don't know everything. They don't know all of the old stuff, right? Because they're new fans. And I think the only real attitude is what your attitude is both you and I explain things on our channel. Why do we explain them? Because people don't know them, and I want you to know them. You know what I mean? I love Thrawn, and a lot of people haven't read them, so I'm going to share that with you because I love it, and I think you'll love it too. I think that's how the community needs to be. And of course, if you like any part of Star Wars, then you are a true fan. But there is one thing I would like to add on top of that, because there are some people in the community that get all this hate and they get flack and all this stuff, especially our female creators. Yeah. And even after they get all of this negativity and stuff, like, it's not easy for them to be a fan, and they're still here, still making content and still loving it. I think you know, it's like the saying, you know, everyone has faith until it's tested.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that they are fighting an uphill battle, I think really and truly cements them as the best of us.
Yes, definitely. If we're going to attribute any kind of label of true fan, I think they're the most deserving. When you're, you know, trying to be as passionate as you are with Star Wars or any kind of fandom, and there's this constant pushback from the fandom itself, because we can't really separate it between like us and them, right? It's just like this whole thing, and this whole thing that unfortunately exists. And so when we've got like amazing creators, Victoria Vader, Shayla Wren, why thanks friend, she's new and upcoming, and I'm enjoying her breakdowns of the books that, you know, I haven't read Queen's Peril and Queen's Shadow, and I'm definitely going to check them out after the Thrawn books. But like, we have so many female creators who constantly, and this is reinforced in my mind when I'm tagged in their videos. And they're asking me, is this true?
Is this true? Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really feel like I have any more authority than anyone else, especially if they're as passionate and they did their research. So like when we're doing the same videos and it's them who's like questioned, and they're like, I'm not sure if what you're saying is true, but what Element says is true. And I'm just like, yeah, this is this disparity or dichotomy between being a male creator in Star Wars and a female creator. And I wholeheartedly 120% just applaud the resilience and the gusto of our female Star Wars TikTok creators. And if you are watching this, we love you.
Absolutely. Also, it's not my place to say, but Shayla Wren, you should come on.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm gonna reach out for sure to a lot of creators that I still need to have guest on this podcast. I mean, I have a couple of DMs that are like, can I guest and stuff like that. I gotta handle that business first. I think, yeah, you're correct, especially when I think you said this in a previous podcast before, in your podcast, is that, you know, there's new fans in every trilogy, right? And there are some fans whose main character is Luke, some fans whose main character is Anakin, and some fans whose main character is Rey. And some people will not know as much about Luke, Anakin, or Rey, and you know, it's evidenced now today. Not a lot of people who hate Rey know a lot about her, or even kind of had the wherewithal to pay attention to the movies or give her the time of day to kind of formulate this informed opinion about her. We're still getting people commenting on our videos. How did she beat Kylo Ren? When that has been answered many times. Like, how does she pilot? Like, it's all in the movies. So definitely the dichotomy between the generational dichotomy between fans is definitely like a huge factor. But like, I think overall, I think the healthiest way you can approach any kind of fandom is just, you want more people to be fans. If someone doesn't know a character, you should have been like, oh, let me tell you about this character. Instead of just like, you don't know, get out of here.
I literally started a Star Wars book club because I read all the books, and there's so many people that I know would love these, and so
Yeah.
and now I love sharing and being able to talk about it with these people. And it's just an opposite idea of trying to hoard information and making it, you know, like an elite tier of those who have access to this. No, we want everyone in. And the best part of getting everyone in is that we get more stuff. We get better stuff. If the Star Wars fandom is incredible and it's big and it's thriving, they're going to throw more money behind making games for us.
Yes.
And we'll get more series and things. And I don't know about you, but that's what I want.
You don't know about me.
I mean, I do. That's how dyads work, but still.
I mean, I definitely have to applaud you for the book club. It's something that I definitely probably should have thought of a long time ago, but you know what? All the power to you, because, you know, as evidenced in the Discord server with the book club, so much more people know about all of these stories. Like, if I were to ask you, well, if I were to ask you, you'd know, but if I were to ask the next person what they thought of Lost Stars, they probably wouldn't know anything about it. And just to have so many more people in my comment section saying, I read Lost Stars, I love that book, or I read Dark Disciple or Master and Apprentice, or people just in general, like the landscape is changing now. People in general just wanting to start reading books. And then I don't know about how many people are commenting in your videos, but definitely on mine, a lot more people asking, I want to get into the books. Where do I start? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm going to have to make a lot more book content. But that goes, and that's another thing about, you know, about this fandom is we now have a solid canon that these books are based around, meaning it's going to connect to our TV shows and to, you know, everything. And that's new. We didn't have that before. And don't get me wrong, I love Legends. Like, my Legends count right now is 131 books. So I'm up at today. I get people who are like, oh, that's only because you've never read any Legends book. And I'm like, my dude.
If only you knew.
Obviously, it doesn't make me a better or bigger fan or anything. It just means I had more time on my hands. But, you know, now that we have this new and established canon that's going to weave in and out of our films and our comics and all this stuff, now's the time. And so there's been some resistance on that side because, you know, people grew up with one thing. And George Lucas was always tearing down and contradicting things that weren't part of his G canon. And so now we have the solid one. If you haven't started yet, now's the time, because it'll just enhance everything. And yeah, I highly recommend it.
And that adds to the overall, like, that adds to the dichotomy, because when you say people grew up with Legends, that's because there was no Star Wars for so long. We had the prequels and we had like special edition releases, but then like Legends really kind of, you know, picked up the slack with comics and books, and they were coming out with like New Jedi Order and filling in all of these time periods that people were interested in. And, you know, I mean, I understand where they're coming from when people say that stuff isn't canon anymore, but we do have to make this distinction in our second topic of this podcast now. What is canon versus Legends, or EU? And so I'm going to throw it off to you to give kind of like this, you know, overall description.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I answer this question a lot, and I get asked this question even more, which is totally fun. And that's another thing I love, is because there's always new people coming in, and they don't know. And I'm like, oh, I've answered this 3 times. They don't know. It doesn't matter how many times if that person doesn't know. But yeah, the difference between Legends and canon is, you know, Legends is was all the books and comics and things that were being licensed out by Disney to these various authors and comic and like Dark Horse and stuff like that. They're being licensed out so that they can add their own content, and a lot of it was great. Some of it was kind of weird, a little hinky, but the big thing to acknowledge is that there was tiers of canon.
Yeah.
So anything that George Lucas himself touched was called G canon. That was a very top level. And then below that was S canon. That's most of the books. There was a N canon for random stuff. I believe there was a C canon. And these kind of existed in their own universes, where S canon is based off of the movies and things, but anything official does not have to. Like, George Lucas didn't read those.
Yeah.
And he would often ignore them when he came with the prequels. It wiped out a whole bunch of things, like Jaster Muriel, which remember that name. We may come back to that later. When Disney purchased Lucasfilm and we're going to start creating their own new content, they decided, and I agree with the decision, they're going to take all the stuff that George Lucas considers canon, G canon, and they're going to expand on that. That way, when you have a book, it's going to connect. It's all at the same tier. It's all at the same level. It's all one cohesive story now. We never had that before. But they didn't stop. They don't stop people from still purchasing the old books and things like that. I mean, I think that there's like 350, 365, somewhere in that range of books. So you can still get them. But so that you know which is which, they now have the two labels of Legends and Canon.
And so, you know, I think a lot of the confusion arises when people think that, you know, EU and Legends material was canon, and when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, they tossed it aside, or they got rid of it. But I think we need to make this clear distinction that it was never G canon, or it was never like prime continuity. And if we go back to all of the interviews with George Lucas talking about this matter, he's always been very consistent on his messaging. You know, he has his world, and what they're doing is he considers a parallel universe, and so they can do whatever they want with like the world that he's built, and they could write stories about Luke and about, you know, the Old Republic and all of these time periods that happen. It's just a parallel universe, and it does not affect. It may be based on what he built, but it does not affect the G canon continuity. And so what we have now with Disney is just canon. So It's kind of like, in biblical terms, like the canon Bible. Like, it's just one continuity that is a cohesive timeline that everything that's published now follows and is, you know, consistent with. And I think that kind of helps things, because now that we have a consistent canon, we can have all of these books, we can have all of these comics, we can have all these video games, that can make a clear distinction about whether it's canon or not. Now, there are a couple of apps and games out there like Galaxy of Heroes who have Legends material in it, and so that's kind of like canon adjacent. But for the most part, a lot of the material we're getting nowadays, books, comics, TV shows, especially movies, they're all canon. And it's, you know, and I like to make this joke that like Legends is a convoluted mess, and that's because
how did Shakti die in Legends?
How many times did she die?
So, and that's just one of the jokes, because in Legends she dies like 5 different times in different ways in different series. And so it can be, like you said, a convoluted mess, and so we actually can follow actual through lines now, and we never could. And one of the coolest things is, now they are able to draw stuff from now that it's all one canon. You know, if you watch Rogue One, you see Chopper, you know, you see the Ghost in that battle.
They're saying General Syndulla over the PA.
Yeah. And in Rise of Skywalker, one of the call signs is for Inferno Squad.
Yeah.
Which, it's crazy the connections that we are now able to have, but it also streamlines things. Like I love the 2003 Clone Wars, the animated show. Love it. It's awesome. But there's certain problems like Mace Windu punching 1,000 super battle droids down with his fist. It means the whole conflict with battle droids doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It definitely creates some like power creep issues with all of the other stories. But see, I kind of see where a lot of people can be confused nowadays. I guess the simplest way we can put it is that anything after 2014, 2015 is canon. Unless it is, expressly labeled Legends. Because I think there are a couple of novels in 2014, 2015 that kind of didn't make the cut. I think Heir to the Empire didn't.
It's April of 2014 was the cutoff, and which led to some interesting things like Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir is canon, but it was made by Dark Horse. But it is canon. You can always there's plenty of guides online, but also Element and I are always happy to help out. So if you ask us if something's canon, and we see it now, so you have to understand, TikTok does not show us all of our comments. It does not. I think there's like a limit per 5 minute or something like that.
I don't know if it's like a time limit or if it's like a number. I just know that when I sort comments, and then I scroll to the very bottom and I see one, I'm like, oh, and then I happen to back out and come back, it's gone. And it's hard to keep track of everything, but we'll definitely try to help. But I guess the one thing I do want to say about this is that these are the best way to understand this is that these are separate continuities. And so if you're a big fan of Legends and you don't like canon, you can like the Legends continuity and stick to that continuity. All of that stuff is Legends continuity. And so it's not like they don't exist. Enjoy it. They're all still there for you to enjoy. I'm replaying KOTOR and KOTOR 2, and I'm still playing SOTOR. So it's not like Disney came through my doors and like, that's not canon. You cannot play those games.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's just separate continuities, and like anything from Legends just has huge contradictions to what G-Canon established. And so when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they just had to kind of keep everything consistent. Now there's like minor contradictions here and there. There's definitely some that creep through, the story group isn't perfect.
Yeah.
I think we do have contradiction with Ahsoka and season 7,
as well as the novelization of
the prequels.
Well, the novelization of TFA actually has Rey and Poe meet at the end of that, and then that was cut out of the movie, so that was added at the end of The Last Jedi.
I always chalk that down to kind of like the novelizations are kind of canon, but their own kind of continuity, because in the novels it makes sense, right? They meet there, they don't meet in The Last Jedi. But in the movies, they don't meet there, but they meet in The Last Jedi. So it's just kind of a difference between what happens in the books, what happens in the movies. But hopefully that answered a lot of people's questions about what is canon versus Legends. And the best way to recognize it is if it's got a Legends banner on it.
And you know who's a huge fan is both, because we both have Pablo Hidalgo and Dave Filoni are the keepers of the lore. And between these two guys, they pretty much have everything down pat. Especially now that we have, Dave Filoni is working on the Mandalorian, and in his mind, he has all this new continuity there, which I think is really cool, especially with Jon Favreau, because he has a lot of the old continuity in his mind. and how they're able to interact with each other, and like I'm sorry, that's one thing I wanted to bring out. Is one of the really cool things is there's a lot of these things that were never canon that they're now bringing into the canon universe, and it's so cool. It's so exciting to see some of that stuff. It makes me really happy.
Absolutely, and that's something that we have to point out to our viewers and to everyone kind of listening is, you know, when we say EU and Legends was never canon or was never G canon, because George Lucas kind of regarded them as a parallel universe, and then we say in the same sentence Disney saved Star Wars, is because when a lot of you are you know, frustrated that they quote unquote, you know, tossed aside Legends, I think you're forgetting a lot of the things, or at least not aware that a lot of Legends stuff is now canon because of Disney when they weren't. Now, this is I have to reiterate this as much as possible, because if Legends was never G canon, that means Disney is canonizing a lot of it. So we're going from Legends existed, or EU existed, was never canon, to EU is now Legends, but now some of it is canon. And I think they're doing a great job of it. You know, I think the latest and greatest edition from Legends, which we'll be talking about later in the show, is Jango Fett's progeny, or his origin. And before that was the canonization of Sir Itachi, which I'm sure a lot of fans of the Quest books will be absolutely thrilled about. I know I did a video on that, and a lot more people than I knew had actually read those comics and books. They were like, I can't believe it, Sir Itachi, my favorite. I'm like, wow. Yeah. Okay, that's not one of the characters you think is someone's favorite, but I guess, you know, those people existed. And
I actually had someone in the comments ask, like, is there any way they could bring Dash Rendar into canon? I'm like, he's canon. He is.
I think wasn't his ship in Tross?
I believe his ship was in there, but there's a book that actually talks about him, you know, walking around in a cantina being, you know, pissed off at this smuggler Han Solo stealing the jobs that he wanted. So
yeah, he's canon in a book I think it was by Jason Fry. But I do believe there was kind of like he was credited, or not he was, but his ship that he's famed for was credited as making an appearance in The Rise of Skywalker. And guys, like, we have Revan, Undeadu, Tanis, Tenebris.
So excited about
Decimus?
About Tenebris specifically.
Yeah. Tenebris being Darth Plagueis' master. But of course, these are all like in name only. But when we say canon, it's just like they existed, right? And so when in the movies they reference the Old Republic, when they reference all of these old ancient Sith lords and like the history of the galaxy, like as a whole, yes, all of those time periods existed. Ancient Sith lords existed. Tar Vizsla, the Mandalorian Wars, all of that, the 100-Year Darkness, all existed in canon. But the details within are still legends. So if you have stories from Revan, if your Revan was a girl, or if, because I had a comment that was really funny, you know, when we were doing that, our videos on that gatekeeping video, I had a comment. It made me laugh so hard. It said, I don't know who that guy is because Revan was a girl in my playthrough. And I was just like, that's true.
I'm replaying it right now, and spoiler alert, Revan is a black guy. so
dude, Revan's an Asian. But if we're talking about Legends canon, I think he definitely has at least an established appearance now with the MMO. But yeah, you know, to a lot of us who played KOTOR and KOTOR 2, have these characters who were people that were just video game ex machina, right? Just as a result of who we were playing. But in any case, Legends and Canon, two different timelines, two different continuities. And so when we say something isn't canon, that just means it doesn't fit on that G canon level. And when it's Legends, it still exists, but that's just, it doesn't have any bearing on the movies or the shows and the books that we're, consuming today.
There's still a handful of characters that I have irrational love for, like Saba 17, that I can't wait to be brought in. If it happens, I'm okay if it doesn't, but I'd love to see some of these get brought in and been put onto the large screen. I just have to wait. And Dave Filoni, I trust.
Absolutely.
I think he'll make the right decision when the time comes.
And I'm the huge cheerleader for Satele Shan. But see, there's a lot to unpack there if you're going to canonize her. Like, you got to go all the way back to Revan. And so it's just a lot to do to get to Satele. So,
but I'm also happy that we don't start movies with like Chewie being dead and stuff. And I don't, because spoiler alert, in Legends he gets crushed by a moon when the Yuuzhan Vong invade. And also I don't ever want to see the Yuuzhan Vong on screen because they're disgusting. And it would be horrifying. So
that would be. Could you imagine a canon Yuuzhan Vong on screen?
Yes. So just for that, they don't believe in technology, and so everything that they use is all living things. Their weapons are sentient, like serpents that can harden their body, and when you get promoted, like they may chop off your arm, and that you get like a weird crab monster put in its place. It's disgusting. Like all of them are just like hodgepodge pieces of random living things, and just like meat, like rotting flesh and stuff like that. And it's, I don't need it.
So I think the closest thing that we can come to Yuuzhan Vong in terms of like other franchises is kind of like the Zerg from StarCraft. I mean, I'm just picturing a lot of their
Swarmers
buildings
and stuff.
Yeah, and their swarms and stuff. Definitely, if you play Destiny, I mean, it's not a 1-to-1, but the Hive. If you know who the Hive is in Destiny,
yeah,
lots of I guess similarities in there. But for sure, there's a lot in Legends that definitely wouldn't work in canon, but that's as with all of things coming from another continuity to canon, right? It has to be adapted.
Yeah. And sorry, when you said Zerg, all I could think of is Buzz Lightyear's enemy. I can't remember his name. I was like, that's not right. Moving on, this kind of connects because we're really trusting Dave Filoni that since he is the lore master, between him and Pablo Hidalgo, who's in the background, these guys are they know everything. They really do. And I often see people who want to make Dave Filoni president of Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
I see that, Dave Filoni for president, because a lot of people, I see a lot of hate for Kathleen Kennedy. So yeah, I mean, Dave Filoni for Lucasfilm president. What do you think about that?
There's a short and long answer, and we're going to get into both of them. But the short answer is no. The long answer is that
can I give my short answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Also no.
So the long answer to that is that Dave Filoni, first of all, just piggybacking off of what you just said about how they know everything, they're lore masters. It doesn't have to come down to knowledge with them, right? They are the ultimate authority. So when people say when the writer says so, that's when Dave Filoni and Hidalgo say so. So if there is no canon reference to anything, and we ask them and they say it, that's officially canon. Just think about that for a second. Like being in that position where is Luke Skywalker a Grandmaster? And Filoni says no. That's like the power behind those words.
Is that how Webster felt when he started his dictionaries?
So much power. Yeah, so the long answer behind this, he needs to stay in a creative position. Okay, their positions within companies have their roles to play, and the role of president or the role of executive producer is not a Filoni role. We want Filoni as close as possible to the narrative, as close as possible to the lore, and as close as possible to the actual creative process in making these movies, shows, books, or even, comics. And I mean, it helps to have the story group there to kind of self-verify their own lore accuracy. But to have Filoni, balancing the books and maintaining client relations is not something that I see him doing. It's like it's kind of like having Filoni be so far. Wanting Filoni to be the president of Lucasfilms is tantamount to asking him to be as far away from from Star Wars as possible.
It's important to understand what these roles do before you want people to be part of them. And this is I think it's just often misunderstood in America that it's a promotion. That means it's a step up. So I should do that, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different job. Like if you're a really good farmer, does that mean you should be a chef? I don't. It's a different job.
Yeah.
Dave Filoni is one of the best storytellers around. If you watch the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and how inviting, I literally walked past the couch of my little brother. He's 8 years younger than me. Was watching that show, and I don't know what happened. He was watching a marathon. I thought I walked past, and then all of a sudden the sun was down, and it was 5 hours later, and I was I was like, "Is there more? I need more." And that's how Dave Filoni got the job. He's an incredible storyteller, and I want him telling stories. Like you said, I don't need him balancing budgets. I don't need him hiring directors. You know what I mean? Like I want him to get to the point where he is directing and writing these stories himself. Ideally, I think that's what we need, and that's actually what
he's doing it now.
That's what Disney is doing. They brought him on The Mandalorian, and this is his first experience at directing live action, and he's killing it. And in the past, the next level would be directing movies, but I think TV shows are more important now. I think they're just better.
Yeah, I think TV shows have eclipsed movies. Definitely in the narrative sphere, because obviously the state of the world now definitely doesn't make it easy for people to go out and see a movie anymore. But just the nature of Star Wars and the nature of so many perspectives, so many stories, so many threads, you just can't tell that in 2 hours, give or take, anymore.
Can't be done.
I mean, even if you have a trilogy, you still kind of like within each movie inside a trilogy, you still need a beginning, middle, and end, structurally. And to do that with 2 hours with such a huge universe as Star Wars with so many characters it's impossible to do.
And I still maintain that the sequel trilogy should have been 4 movies.
Yeah, for sure. If there was ever a time for them to break from the trilogies and do the Twilight and the Harry Potter part 1 and 2, that was a perfect time to do it. I mean, what, like, The Rise of Skywalker, would that have been higher on my ranking if they included Rey training more and building her lightsaber, and possibly like including Ben having a conversation with Anakin for the first time? I think those things would have made it better. But of course, when you do a part 1 and part 2, there's a lot more room. There's a lot more headroom to do so much more. And so I think ultimately, whether it would be ranking higher in my list or not, the movies would have benefited overall.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many extra concerns for making movies of like, okay, this is a company and it needs to make money, right? Yeah. So if your movie is too long, then you are shortening the amount of showings you can have in a single day. You are like, there's just so many other outside things to consider. And when you think about the, you know, like we've seen The Mandalorian is a great example of this, because season 1 we have nearly 8 hours of time with the Mandalorian. We don't have anywhere near 8 hours with any character in the sequels. You know what I mean? Don't. And so if any of you guys feel like, yeah, this character was okay, but they could have used more development or better development, that's because we're all limited by time. Yeah. And they have to trim their movie. Like, I have trouble fitting stuff into a minute. I can't imagine doing a movie. You know what I mean?
That's like, so true.
It's an editing process. Especially if you watch Empire of Dreams, the making of the original Star Wars trilogy, and you find out that A New Hope was saved in the editing room. Yeah. It was the editing room that determined whether it was a success or a failure. And, you know, and then I look at a movie like Batman versus Superman, and if you watch the Ultimate Edition, it's a different movie. Like, I understand that movie. Yeah. There's so many random things that happen in the theatrical cut because they had to cut it down for certain things. I don't know. It's a wild ride. I don't envy what they do, but I would like a job, please, if you're watching.
That's definitely something like behind the scenes look. When I film my nicer videos, it usually is like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and I have to cut that down to fit into a minute, because I can only imagine, because like these movies have so many deleted scenes, so much more than they're willing to release on these kind of like featurettes. You know, I'm pretty sure we get maybe 10 minutes of deleted scenes on the Blu-ray, but there's like maybe 2 more hours at least of filming that they did with extra scenes.
And how much more of that was storyboarded?
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's why ultimately I'm a book fan, because books don't have budgetary limitations, they don't have time limitations. We can see into the minds of the characters. So, and I don't say that to sound like an elitist jerk, no. But you just there.
Unless you were saying there's imaginary limits.
But like, if you're like, okay, this is how I imagine this shot, and you're like, in order to get this shot, I have to have a crane. I have to have a camera guy on the crane, and he's got to be hanging here with his camera in this specific situation. And then I have to film everyone doing their thing. I have to pay all of this crew and the primary actors, however many takes it takes to get them that. But we're filming on location. So I also have to feed all of these people. Not only do I have to feed them, I have to make sure the food can get here, because we're filming in a remote part of, you know, Africa. So it might be cheaper if I hire chefs and fly them out with me and do all the things and make them prepare. Like, there's so many facets, and I don't want Dave Filoni to focus on hiring cooks and, you know, planning all this stuff. I want him just telling me a story.
I mean, Dave Filoni is one of those guys. He's a let me take a look at that kind of guy, you know. And when I say that, he's the kind of guy who, when it comes to the making and the edition and the production of Star Wars, he's going to let me take a look at that, and he's gonna make sure it's up to snuff, you know. And we gotta look at this in gallery. When Favreau was, you know, he was commenting on a lot of what Kathleen Kennedy was responsible for, you know, making connections with the people who had the technology to enable volume to exist, and kind of giving Favreau the means to make it a reality, and just enabling the filmmakers to make their films or to make their show. And so when you picture Dave Filoni as president of Lucasfilm, all you're picturing is him with a bunch of books on his desk, writing things and on phones with people, trying to make connections. And, you know, as much as I would have the confidence that he could do that, it's not something we want him to do.
Is that where we want to? Two analogies, you know, I think in analogies exclusively. And two of them come to mind. One, if you are an anime fan and you watch Naruto and you liked it, and you saw Naruto training to be the most powerful ninja, and he wanted to become Hokage, and he becomes Hokage, and now he sits behind a desk and goes through paperwork, and he's like, oh man,
and it's piling up too because he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to do it.
That's what that's what it is. You know what I mean? And then the secondary analogy I came up with is also a chef. You can, if you get the most incredible chef, you want to eat that guy's food. You know what I mean? That guy or girl or whoever. You don't want that chef instead managing other chefs and organizing food being brought in, and kitchen staff, and
inventory,
hiring sous chefs, and inventory and all this stuff. I don't care if you, I want that person cooking the food, and that's what it comes down to.
I like that analogy.
Make a separate video on that. So
I like that analogy a lot. I mean, we see it in Kitchen Nightmares, right? A lot of the chefs get a lot of the problems arise from, you know, they're not, you know, handling the inventory. They're not handling, you know, labeling their products and stuff. And a lot of the stuff in the fridge goes by the wayside. But
that's actually literally the basis of that show is people start restaurants because they're good at cooking. Yeah. And they're not good at the other stuff that you need to do to run a restaurant. Yeah. That's the problem. Definitely. You don't want that in Star Wars.
Filoni, very good at storytelling, a brilliant mind in storytelling. Don't want him behind the desk. He needs to be on the set, and he needs to be writing these stories. Okay, so Dave Filoni, not the president of Lucasfilm, always the head creative of everything. Like, he started in animation, he should just be the creative director, all productions. So now, speaking of Filoni, we have hit the point in the show where we are talking about Chapter 14 of The Mandalorian. You've been warned. Spoiler alert. First impressions. And you probably saw it in my reaction. I was prepared for nothing to happen. And then something happened. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I was like, okay, they might do a travel episode, but we're so close to the end. I don't think that they can do that. Yeah. I was like, but they have to arrive. So I'm used to Tython being this ancient world with all these huge temples and all this stuff. That's what I was expecting to happen. And that they'd have to find where Tython is in order to travel there. Yeah. And then once they got there, they'd have to search around it for it. No, not at all. They're just like, all right, Tython,
Yeah. They landed on the Seeing Stone. I mean, I was expecting that too. You know, if we're being honest, we're going back to Tour and Tython and the Jedi Temple there and the grounds in which it exists. It was definitely in the back of my mind, but I guess like the overall look of the planet was giving me huge Tython vibes, like going through and killing all those flesh raiders in those canyons and stuff.
For sure, it is. I mean, it looked exactly like Tython. Like I said, I was expecting them to have to search, but now he was just like, Siri, navigate to Tython, and then they went there, pulled in Atmo, and they're like, okay, where do we have to go? Right there. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't help that he has a jetpack.
Which, like, I don't have any problem with that because, you know, it got us right to, you know, it's like when you get a burrito and you open it up and there's no rice and it's extra meat and you're like, okay, I mean, I was here for the meat anyways. Like, yeah, let's do it.
They've been doing that a lot. You know, I mean, it's 3 episodes now that I think that they're going to just like simmer into a rolling boil and like, boom, Ahsoka is at the gate with their lightsabers, and now boom, they're at Tython on the Seeing Stone. And I think like now, having seen where, or at least their best practices in this season, like we're all speculating who the Jedi is going to be. If whoever is going to be at the final episode, they're just going to come out with their lightsabers like, I'm here, you know? So
part of me wants to think that whatever Jedi is going to come is going to show up at the end after all the fighting, after, you know, the next 2 episodes, but
after they've rescued him.
Yes, after they've rescued, you know, our loving baby Grogu, 50-year-old baby Grogu, Benjamin Button Grogu. I don't know. Anyways, but then also considering how they've been doing this, that could literally be the very first thing of the next episode.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I would love it. You know, that's an awesome like cliffhanger. Would that be the final episode then of the season? Would that be the cliffhanger? Like he shows up after everything?
So
and then
in my dream, in my heartscape, what I want to happen is, you know, next episode they get their crew together in order to storm. They find a location, they get their crew together, and then they storm it, and then we get a cliffhanger, and then the final episode they rescue, and then I want the Jedi to show up. And in my heart of hearts, I want it to be Quinlan Vos. From what I've been seeing with Jon Favreau and just his love of the badass in general, I think he might go with Mace Windu. But considering how they've been pulling things from Legends into canon, I can see Kyle Katarn showing up.
Yes, that is certainly one of the possibilities.
I'll do a backflip
from last week. And this is one of the things that I've been kind of trying to hammer down is how far removed do we need to go from the Skywalker story to make any of this work? Because you know a lot of people are saying, Luke, what about Luke? What's he doing now? And I'm just like, I think at this point they're gonna try their hardest. Lucasfilm's gonna try their hardest, especially if they're doing all of these spin-off shows, to kind of create a universe that is lived outside of the Skywalker story. There's so many people, so many planets. Going from Order 66 to the Galactic Empire and the Galactic Civil War. They've tried to lay this groundwork, you know, of a galaxy that just doesn't know about everything. There are planets out there who have never heard of Luke Skywalker, who have never heard of Darth Vader, who have never heard of Anakin Skywalker. And I think it's a good thing that they do this, to make this kind of separation where that the Skywalker story is done. And if they're going to revisit it again, it's going to be about Luke. It's going to be about that, that isolated bubble around Luke Skywalker. If they're going to do something with the Jedi here in The Mandalorian, Ahsoka was far removed enough because she wasn't in the movies. She has very little to do with Vader, Luke Skywalker, and the sequels, aside from being a voice. And so they could easily place her in The Mandalorian, and the same thing goes for Thrawn. And so I want, and I will agree with you on this. I do want them to do or canonize more so than they have. Canonize Kyle Katarn and give him his own story outside of what is Luke doing. And so there's 3 possibilities now for me, at least for me, just because I'm a huge fan of Tython being this ancient monolith for the Jedi. I want Yaddle to reappear from having taken a bearish vow, because there is no canon reference as to where she went and then she disappeared. So her death isn't even on record. So I want her to have taken the vow and separated herself from the dealings with the Republic and the Clone Wars and come back and see her son.
Okay. Quick question for you. So one of the reasons I love Thrawn is because I kind of identify with him. Obviously I'm not as smart, but the way that he divorces his own biases or assumptions is something I do relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your mind, is Grogu the child of Yaddle? Question 1. Question 2, is it the child of Yaddle and Yoda? Question 3, are all of that species force sensitive?
Question 1, child of Yaddle. Question 2, that species physiologically reproduces asexually and they lay eggs. That's a theory. Don't take that. Don't take that as Bible verse. Question 3. Yeah, going off of what we know thus far, with the only 3 that we know from the species, and if we're including Legends, even more so. So, who is it? Vandar and
I only got Vandar. I don't know who else you're referring to.
Oteg. Yeah, even including Legends, the only people of that species that we know of are all Jedi Masters. And Grogu, it's just a matter of time. So, I would say their species, more so than being force sensitive, they are avatars of the light. And so they are servants of the light side. And I can't say anything further from that, but I do know that Grogu it would make sense canonically for Grogu to be to be a hatchling, because he arrived in an egg-shaped capsule, in the Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
And it would make sense because then that would explain that Yoda's not his father, and Yoda and Yaddle didn't get busy. And so Yaddle kind of had this, asexual reproduction, laid an egg, and that was Grogu, and they trained them. And then when Yaddle disappeared, she took Grogu and hid him.
And I'm only supporting this because I feel like this is also riffing off of Sapa 17. Remember, she disappeared, laid eggs. Like, there was a bunch of reptile
Mm-hmm.
just out there protecting eggs and stuff. Okay.
I do support Quinlan Vos, though. He matches the aesthetic and the theme of Mandalorian so much.
I think he would be the best choice for, because what I want is for the show not to end. And I think when Grogu leaves Mando, I think that's where the show ends, or when it goes off the rails, so to speak. That will be the jumping of the shark. So I think a welcome addition would be a third member of their crew.
Yeah.
As a family, and considering how orderly, disciplined, and as much as a zealot as Din is, I think someone like Quinlan Vos would be the perfect foil, personality-wise, to Din, and having that person train Grogu is going to create interesting conflict.
Yeah,
that's why I want them to show up.
He's
at the end, and just be this like weird, dirty old man Jedi that's all grizzled. And if you know Quinlan Vos, he was never the poster boy for the Jedi to begin with. He fell in love with Asajj Ventress. He fell to the dark side completely. He came back. He did survive Order 66. He's seen some stuff, and I think that would be a very interesting take. And considering how Ahsoka didn't want to train him because of his attachment, that's where I feel like Quinlan would, because he has had that attachment and has been able to move past it. So
Quinlan Vos definitely makes a lot of sense. I think, like, I mean, lore-wise and narratively-wise, like, I want Yaddle to make a return, but definitely, you know, in terms of thinking about the crew and the show's aesthetic and theming, Quinlan Vos makes sense. A perfect foil, perfect wrench, because as you said, he has experience with the dark side, and I think we've seen Grogu on multiple occasions, you know, flirt with the dark side, and I think that has to be confronted.
Yeah.
And Quinlan Vos is the perfect person. Attachment seems to be Grogu's crux right now, and Quinlan Vos has dealt with that for sure.
I gotta ask, what was your first thought when you're watching the show and Slave One flew in?
I said, are we doing this now? Like, is this the because, you know, I always expected them to kind of pay off Boba Fett from episode 1. As you know full well, I was prepared for this particular episode to be a non-episode, just a travel episode, a plot pusher. And when I realized they were already at the seeing stone and he was already doing the beacon, I was like, are we doing this now? And then you can watch in my reaction on YouTube, when Slave One came up, I was like, is that Slave? Are we doing this now? Like, both of these things are being paid off right now. And yeah, that was like my reactions. Like, is this happening right now? What was your reaction?
Oh, it was same. I mean, it was me. Like, I had the same exact reaction of Grogu every time Mando says his name. I was like, what?
I love that reaction so much. He did it twice in the beginning. Grogu. Huh?
Yeah, that was literally my reaction. And it was like, okay, I guess this is not a non-episode.
Nope.
And then also, your thoughts on actually seeing a physical manifestation of the Force surrounding Grogu.
Oh man, I was a lot of this was internalized, but I was like screaming at the top of my lungs because, you know, most of our depictions of the Force has it's always been audible, but it's always been kind of like this streak in the air. Like we got something in The Rise of Skywalker when Palpatine absorbed the Dyad energy. And in addition, the Force lightning has always been our de facto, you know, depiction of the Force in canon. And we have legends, you know, Satil Shan Hadoken. We have Tutaminis. When Satil Shan takes a lightsaber into the hand. Mm-hmm. And when Yoda is doing it with the lightning in Revenge of the Sith, but like in ambience. It was so incredible to see, especially when Din sees it.
And Din is Well, okay, so we don't know that Din sees it. It feels like he does,
Because he's pushing against it, right?
but he is pushing against it.
Is he
but
pushing against like pressure, or is he pushing against what he sees?
And that's the thing. I don't know. I mean, what if he doesn't see it? Only we see it, and he's just seeing the child communing on a rock.
And there's a bunch of
I'll just pick him up.
Yeah.
No. I don't know. I mean, does he? Do you think he sees it, or do you think he does not see it? Because I don't recall a visual indication other than him being like, "The hell are these butterflies doing here?"
Yeah, I'd have to watch it again, because there is a moment where he has his hands forward, and it looks like he's pushing into it. But it could be that like the wind is just like blowing really fast around Grogu, and he's like shielding himself. I don't know. I'd have to look at that scene again. If he is in fact pushing up against the Force, and I mean that is a clear indication that he can see it. But if he's just like shielding himself from the wind and the throes of what Grogu is doing, then I guess not. He can't see it, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Ancillary to what we're going to approach next. Well, I mean, we definitely discussed it at length, who Grogu is reaching out to. Now, is that a beacon, or is it like a focusing like sphere? Does it like create a link to someone specific?
I obviously this is so if you guys follow us on TikTok, you know we always talk about canon lore and things like that. This is pure speculation. Just you know, this isn't me like calling upon an old book or anything like that. But considering Ahsoka's words, I don't believe it's anyone direct. I think that this is a light side vergence in the Force, just like we know the cave on Dagobah is a dark side vergence. And I think it acts as an amplifier. So if you are Force sensitive, you're gonna hear this screaming on the light side, and if you are someone that's like someone is calling out, and I'm going to go examine that, because she didn't say for sure someone was going to show up. She just said if they choose, then yes, someone will show up. So that's where I'm at with it. I think this is a dark side, a light side versions, being the opposite of Dagobah or Mustafar, which is dark side versions.
Is it the lighting of the beacons calling Rohan to help with the Battle of Gondor? Yeah, it makes sense. I think because I was torn between whether or not it would be a specific beacon, like if he's activating that seeing stone and it connects to another seeing stone, it would have to be a Jedi that sees that the other end activate.
But is its design like a dual tuning fork? You know what I'm hinting at.
Are you talking about Vader's fortress? Well, yeah. I mean, we see the pylons, we see the outcrops. It's definitely creating that type of energy. Boba will have to see if it reaches anybody. Or whether or not that was just a beacon and the torches were lit, or if someone was listening for, short radio frequency bursts.
So what's your over under on it being either Luke, which I don't want it to be Luke, because if Luke takes him to his Jedi training temple, it doesn't. Anyways,
it's
what's
zero.
your over under of it being Luke, Ezra, or Cal?
There's 0 on Luke. I think if they're gonna revisit Luke, it's gonna be a prime Luke show. We're gonna get that story. I think Ezra makes more sense than Cal Kestis because of what they're hinting at and his involvement with Thrawn. They're not gonna tease Thrawn. and not pay that off at least a little bit. Now, does this mean Ezra is going to not be in captivity? See, Cal Kestis makes sense in the fact that he's out there and we don't know where he is. Whereas Ezra, he makes more sense because we're getting Lothcats, we're getting all of these like teases.
But if he's out there, why is Ahsoka looking for Thrawn?
Yeah, that means Ahsoka is looking for Thrawn because he has him. Going off of your dream about the Jedi showing up after they've rescued him, I think, you know, rescuing Grogu is going to be a scenario in which they rescue Ezra. They're gonna find Grogu, and then Ezra, all bearded and old, he's gonna be in the next cell over. And we're gonna see, you know, an episode where Grogu is in the cell and he's just like purring and you know, cooing, and Ezra's in the next cell and is like, I hear you, kid. Like, you know, the grizzled war prisoner, the prisoner of war, and he's just like, you know, I can hear your thoughts. And then they rescue them both. And then at the very end of that episode, Ahsoka will show up and just be like, Ezra, with Sabine. There's so much.
There really is so much. Okay, all right. I have two more things I have to ask you about this episode. One, how long were those stormtroopers locked in there with Grogu, and he's just tossing him around, and they're just like, oh my god, I hate this job so much. Like, because the door was closed when Gideon walked up.
Yes.
So like they were already in there. Grogu's been tossing him around for some time. Is this like a Loki situation where he's like, I've been falling for 30 minutes or however long it was? That's question number one. And we'll start with that one.
It's gotta be, I think it's like closer to 20 minutes. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they've been in hyperspace for that long. Whether or not their landing on Navarro is in tandem with that scene is another kind of like thing to think about. But if we're just going adjacent to when they had just jumped from Tython, 20 minutes, it's got to be a long time though. It's longer than they need it to be.
Listen, if you were getting tossed around, like I don't know how many of you guys have lived through an earthquake, but like getting tossed around for 20 seconds is more than enough.
Yes. I live in an area where I don't get tossed around, but all of my electronics and shelves need me to be like, stop, you know?
The second question is, we got to see Dark Troopers in action for the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious on your thoughts on the Dark Troopers. And then after that, we'll both get into Boba.
I don't have too much to say about the Dark Troopers. At least not yet. They look good. I was excited to see them in action in that episode, but we didn't get too much of them. There wasn't a fight between them and Mando. So, I mean, I'm actually more interested to hear your thoughts on the Dark Troopers because I was more or less more concerned with Grogu than the Dark Troopers showing up at that point.
Yeah, so I mean, the Dark Troopers, we got to. I thought it was, you know, because these people are constantly making love letters to things that they have done before, projects that are related to them. When Mando landed on the planet with the Quarrens, that whole landing sequence was a nod to Apollo 11.
Yeah.
which, you know, that
was
episode,
Apollo 13?
Sorry, Apollo 13. I'm sorry. Apollo 11 was successful. It was Apollo 13 because the director's daughter was doing that episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It felt like a nod to Iron Man 2. You know, I felt like the Dark Troopers were like, you know, Justin Hammer's armored, you know, little trooper transport things flying around. They look they looked cool, but they more than that, they looked menacing.
Yeah.
And being robotic in nature, because we got to see stormtroopers in that episode, A, get owned, just owned, and B, realize that they were getting owned and deciding, yeah, an escape seems appropriate. We don't have that luxury with Dark Troopers, and so I think that was a Chekhov's gun moment to kind of show that their unison and their power.
Definitely. Now that you mention it, it gave me actually Sentinel vibes from Days of Future Past.
Okay.
As well. We also had stormtroopers who failed or didn't even enroll in the Prometheus school of running away from things. They kind of just stood there and took it. Did they keep shooting that boulder and like hoping that
I will, okay, to that guy's credit, the E-Web was making the boulder smaller.
That's true.
And he probably was like, okay, if I keep going.
I mean, is too late?
I believe Bon Jovi would call that living on a prayer.
Oh my god. There's just a lot of like callbacks and filming in this show that is very aware of itself, you know?
Yeah, and I'm here for it. I'm stoked that we have someone like Jon Favreau, who, after working on so many Disney projects, like not the first Iron Man, but all the ones after that, as well as Jungle Book. He's doing Jungle Book 2, Lion King, all this stuff. I'm happy that they had the insight to like, okay, this guy loves Star Wars. Let's put him on this. Because it, like I said, it feels like his knowledge comes from more EU stuff than anything else. Actually, there's an awesome story about first Iron Man is coming out, and like him and Dave Filoni share probably against regulations, but they share each other's projects.
Oh man,
it's an awesome story. They've had a cool relationship. Yeah, I'm happy we're getting this stuff, these nods to these old video games and things like that we never would have gotten before.
I mean, I certainly wasn't thinking about it at the time, but even back as far as the Cobb Vanth episode, huge nod to KOTOR, Yeah, with the Great Dragon Pearl. And that's like it was such a masterful episode, because Cobb Vanth is a new character. Cobb Vanth was created in the Aftermath, which is the first book of the new canon to lead to The Force Awakens. I don't know if it was released before or before the Awakening, but it's either first or second. So yeah, they're really calling upon new canon and old canon simultaneously. And not just pulling from it, but just having those very, very distinct callbacks. Like, even I didn't remember it, and I'm like playing through these games again just for nostalgia, but I was like, holy crap, they literally lured Bantha to the mouth of a great dragon's lair. It's like a one-to-one recreation. By the way, we want Favreau as producer. We don't want him as president of Lucasfilm either. He needs to be in the filmmaking process.
Yes, exactly. I don't. If you're a great chef, I don't need you farming. Yeah.
So, okay, on to, the meat and potatoes of this episode is Boba Fett. And I'm pretty sure we've gotten these questions already today. Is he a Mandalorian? No. Like the episode made it very clear that he is not a Mandalorian. Another thing the episode said, and I'm sure you'll display a graphic of it, but Jango Fett was not a Mandalorian either. At least that was not said in the episode. Jango Fett was a foundling. Yes. A foundling is not a Mandalorian. When a foundling becomes of age, they get to choose whether or not they join the ranks of the Mandalorian or leave and do something else. It's up to them.
if you are telling someone their record, if someone says, "Are you a Mandalorian?" and you say, "My dad was a foundling," that implies that they didn't join the ranks of the Mandalorian.
I mean, and he even answers this in the episode.
Yeah.
Like, did you take the creed? I give allegiance to no one. Okay. Are you a Mandalorian? I'm just a simple man. Like, he might be like dodgy, as I say in my British accent. He might be dodgy about that question, but he's answering for you guys. I mean,
so my thing is, like I said before, I try to have the mind of Thrawn, as much as I can. He is not saying he's a Mandalorian. He has someone. There's someone. He wants his Mandalorian armor back.
Yep.
And he's asking a Mandalorian, "Will you give me my Mandalorian armor back?" He says, "I can only give this to a Mandalorian. Are you a Mandalorian?" And he doesn't say yes. I feel like that's an answer. I mean, am I crazy?
Yeah, it's an answer for sure. I think it's very important to kind of make this distinction between a Mandalorian and a foundling. When Mandalorians find a child that's been abandoned, they're duty bound to take them in and reunite them with their family, or mentor them and raise them and train them. And then they're integrated into Mandalorian society. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, they're not considered, or they're not treated, you know, in a utopian society. They're not considered any less of a Mandalorian when they are integrated. But there are people who are racist. There are people who don't consider them to be of, like, for lack of a better term, pure blood. You know, and this also kind of lends credence to what Almec said in the Clone Wars. Almec didn't consider him a Mandalorian. If we take this new information into account, does that mean Almec was lying or just like being vindictive about Jango Fett? Perhaps, but at the end of the day, whether or not Jango is a Mandalorian is, you know, I think we can still say no to an extent. Now, a lot of people will argue that being a foundling is tantamount to being a Mandalorian, which I don't know. Should we reiterate that part again?
No, I get what you're saying. It's not. That's literally the point of a foundling, is you're finding an orphan child. You're not forcing him into this life. You're going to raise him as your own. But once they become of age, like, you either give them back to their people,
which is what Mando's trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the best example is Grogu. Is Grogu a Mandalorian? No, Grogu is a foundling. Now, when Grogu becomes old enough, it's probably gonna take a while.
Yeah, when he becomes 400, way past Din's lifespan.
But yeah, when Grogu becomes old enough, if he has not been returned to his people, then he gets to make that choice whether he's going to become a Mandalorian or not. He'll go on his own way if he's not. Considering the context, it seems like that's exactly what Jango decided, is not to become a Mandalorian. Yeah. But obviously still had a connection to them. He fought in the Mandalorian War in that conflict.
And I think that armor, because he's not a Mandalorian, he's not of the main houses or clans, and he's just a foundling. I think that armor belonged to his mentor, which we now have because of this translation, this chain code that we got from the actual episode.
Yeah. So we got a little bit of information on that, and so from it looks like we have some new pieces of information that armor is the exact same armor that Jango wore, obviously repainted.
Yeah.
And who knows why it was repainted? It may be because Boba put a bomb in the helmet and gave it to Mace Windu as a gift.
Yeah.
That probably will do some kind of damage to it. I don't know.
Is that the same helmet?
It is entirely possible that that was a similar looking but separate helmet, but it doesn't feel like it. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, both things are very much possible. But yeah, beyond that, we got confirmation that Boba is not a Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
He's not at all, and that his dad. All that's been confirmed about Jango Fett is that he was a foundling. So I'm of the belief that if you are a Mandalorian, saying I will give this to you if you are a Mandalorian, and you say, well, my dad was a foundling, that argument is tantamount to evidence that Jango was not a Mandalorian.
I mean, yeah, it's like saying, are you a veteran? My dad was in the army. Although that's not like a one-to-one analogy. But...
No. It's close though. It's like saying, "Oh, my dad was in the Army Reserves."
Yeah, that's true.
Was he deployed? I mean, if he was deployed, you would have said that.
Yeah, we have to make that distinction.
Yeah,
like foundlings are not by nature Mandalorians. First of all. I mean, the answer was just straight up. He gives no allegiance. He gives allegiance to no one, and that's the first thing that you kind of have to take away from what he says in the episode, right? He has to take the creed, and he didn't. And so, although like I will give you guys this in the episode when he says, "By creed, I'm with you until the child is safe." He's definitely exemplifying someone who has taken the creed. He is exemplifying a Mandalorian code. But at the end of the day, if he doesn't swear allegiance to the way, then he's not. He's simply a clone of a foundling.
Dude has rockets in his knee.
Yeah.
In his knee.
How do you hide that? For all these years, do you think there was an instance where Cobb Vanth was walking around and he just accidentally rocketed someone?
I'm thinking of Super Smash Brothers and Captain Falcon, and like, is that how the knee works?
Oh, he did do a Falcon punch on one of those stormtroopers.
That's true. Also, I would also like to point out because. I saw a bunch of videos saying, "Oh, gaffy sticks are just toothpicks for banthas." No, they're not. they are multi-purpose tools.
Yes,
they're like the spork.
Oh man, I do have one question for you that I would like to pose to you before we get into our last segment. And just give me a quick hot take. Why does he need to be a Mandalorian? Why does Boba Fett need to be a Mandalorian for people?
There's literally no reason that he needs to be a Mandalorian. Or like we find out that this is, from what we understand, it's an organization similar to the Jedi. And there are people that are more devout than others, certainly. But there's no need. There's no reason for him to have to belong to it. All we need to know is that he has skills derived from these people, that they have incredible armor. He has said armor, and he's badass. Like, I don't know what we need other than... I don't know why it's a point of contention, is I guess my thing.
I don't either. I mean, whether his father was a foundling or he's a clone or not, he still kicked ass in that episode. And he's still going to continue to kick ass. He's part of Mando's crew now until the child is safe. And not being a Mandalorian just not going to take anything away from him. I mean, well, if you're a huge fan of Mandalorian society and culture.
But what does that mean? You're a big fan of Duchess Satine? I mean, I love Satine as well. It's a weird thing. It's seeing an awesome Force user do incredible things, show all this awesome power, but not be a Jedi.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but does that degrade what they do? And in fact, I would hasten to say that this is the Mandalorian equivalent to a gray Jedi. Like, you should want this. You guys love this, right?
Yeah. It's actually more so a gray Jedi than an actual gray Jedi, right? This is the literal gray area between could be, would be, isn't, you know?
Honor, dishonor. Yeah.
I
Part
mean,
of this organized structure of warriors and doing your own thing and being independent. This is that point. And so it just feels weird to me that I feel like I don't know, I just feel like critiques and things are not even you know what I mean? I want Grey Jedi to exist, but I need Boba Fett to be on this far side of the spectrum.
we also have to think about Boba Fett having worked for the Empire, which is also a big no-no for a lot of these coverts. But of course, you know, that happened in the original trilogy. What you gonna do? Can't really change things. But in any case, let's move on to our final segment of the episode, which is our fan Q&A. So we're gonna post some questions you guys have asked us, either on our videos or in our comment section. Darth Frank 66 asks, why doesn't he grab his jetpack?
There's literally no reason for this.
Yeah. It's
it's just a story thing. It's the reason that when you respawn in Overwatch, you have to run through this thing before you get to the point. That's because they need to have an artificial barrier between you and the point. Otherwise, you automatically win.
Yep. That's it. It's invisible walls. Plot device. MacGuffin. Deus Ex Machina. It needed to happen in order for them to get Grogu. Aiden Inquisitor asks, would you like to see a Rebels live action sequel series?
My answer is no. It needs to continue to be animated. I think animated is the best medium for Star Wars aside from books, because you're not dealing with actors' salaries or actors' politics and all this stuff. There's no budget. The sky's the limit. And if anyone came into Star Wars because of the Clone Wars, I feel like the Clone Wars did more for Star Wars than any other single piece of Star Wars media, and at least from what I experience. If we can recreate that, then it's gold.
I agree. I mean, there's a certain part of me that wants to see the live action depictions of the characters. But if it's going to result in a sequel series, definitely has to continue on with animated, for sure. The Have asks, since Din could see the beam around Grogu, does that mean he's Force sensitive? I think we covered this a little bit.
I don't think so, but I'm more curious about your thoughts on it.
You know, I have to rewatch that scene again. I'm not sure if he's seeing it more than he is reacting to the throes of what's happening around Grogu. I mean, if he did see it, he is, you know, but if he didn't, he isn't. I guess that's the short of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's right on target. If I don't think that he sees it. I think his arms are out. I think he's trying to pick up this child, and there's a barrier that he is not able to see, but we are able to see. And it was a tool for us, the audience, to know what was going on. But
that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Janice Graves asks, has the Creed come up in any canon source other than Mandalorian?
Not that I've experienced. No.
No.
The person that wrote the most about Mandalorian experience was Karen Travis, and she is one of the people whose her feelings were very hurt by not continuing, by having a new and official canon. And I think that was a mistake. 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 I think that was a mistake And so she made remarks that she would not be continuing with creating Star Wars content. So sadly, we've lost Karen Travis as a Star Wars author. She would be the person to look into, but not that I have experience personally.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We definitely, yeah, to my knowledge, we haven't seen it. The Mandalorian is the most Mandalorian lore we've ever gotten, aside from like, you know, these isolated episodes with Bo-Katan and like on Mandalorian, the Clone Wars, and in Rebels with, you know, Ursa Wren and stuff like that, and just the Mandalorian arcs. But the Creed is definitely a new concept.
If it is anywhere, it would be in Rebels, but I wasn't paying attention for it. I didn't think it to be important, so I'd have to rewatch it. Of course, Sabine is a Mandalorian by birth.
Yes.
So it's highly probable that only foundlings need to take the Creed.
Noah GB2327 asks, do you think the Seeing Stone has something to do with the Zephospheres? What?
Okay, that just broke my brain. And I do believe it to be entirely possible that the Zepho were the first civilization to show up on Tython. Looking at the size and shape of the structure itself, it feels as a Zepho.
Yes.
And the Zepho may end up being the canon equivalent to the Jedi. Yeah, there's a lot of possibility there. But
it for sure, it for sure looks like it. The structure itself looks like a Zepho-like structure. And the Seeing Stone looks like a Zephosphere. So,
and I feel like the Zepho would name something the Seeing Stone.
Absolutely, for sure. And hey, what we saw around Grogu, whether it's a Force depiction or not, that looked like the Life Wind.
You're wrinkling my brain.
I mean, we don't have a canon reference to Jedi, right? We have a canon reference to Ashla, Bogan, and Bendu, which was the old Jedi. So do you think they're replacing Jedi with Zepho as like the... Okay.
I do believe that, but I have to ask you, Jedi, Zepho, are they gray Jedi?
No, they are not. The Jedi who focused on Bendu focused on that area in between. So when people of the Jedi Order fell so far to the light or fell so far to the dark side, they were exiled from the moon. I think from the moon or to a specific moon.
To a moon. From Tython to a moon.
Right. And they would do that until they came back to the middle. So the middle or Bendu is a place of its own.
So the way that I normally think about the Jedi is, especially having the year that we've had here in the United States, is being part of either side is like a political affiliation. If you're in the middle, you're neutral. Being in the middle is not being both. You can't be both. That's not a thing. You can't be far right and far left at the same time. You're in the middle, you're neutral. You're not both. You are a different thing. You are your own area. And that's what the Jedi was.
Yeah. It's a literal scale, right? If you went too far, that's going to take away from the light. You can't really pull both sides of the scale down at the same time.
No.
Obi-Wan K3 Nobi says, or asks, were there any other orders besides 66 programmed into the inhibitor chips?
I've heard that there were. I've never seen any in canon, and any canon material that I have read. Now, I'm caught up on the books. I'm not caught up on the comics. I believe you are closer than I am on that front.
Yeah, there are a couple of runs I'm not up to date with. Afra and Bounty Hunter, but there's definitely Order 65 isn't, I don't think is mentioned at all.
What was Order 65?
Order 65 was, believe it or not, that was a contingency that Palpatine had, where if he wasn't voted into power and someone else was voted Chancellor, he could enact that to have that person arrested.
Interesting, but not surprising.
No, it's not surprising at all. So yeah, 66 was the order because he was the Supreme Chancellor. 65 would have been the order if he wasn't.
Which also stands to reason because we know he was a master chess player. He would win if he was on the Netflix show Queen's Gambit.
Darth Harmon.
So if 66, is there 1 through 66? Is there an order 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way through? What do you think? And I would not be surprised personally if there was.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? It's if there was only one order, it would make sense if executes the order instead of 66.
Considering that when Palpatine met Anakin as a child, you will watch your career with great interest.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that there's more orders than 66, and additional orders probably wouldn't include Anakin?
That's true. Or they do, and they're orders that have to do with Anakin not turning.
Yeah.
Order 67, kill Darth Vader or kill Anakin Skywalker.
There's probably orders for if Maul is still his apprentice. There's probably orders for if Dooku is the apprentice.
We just don't know.
It's fascinating. I've never considered this until just now, but it's interesting.
The Haman 420 asks, how do you think the Obi-Wan show will go?
I will let my esteemed colleague start.
The short of it, it's gonna be good. It's going to be with Ewan McGregor. It's going to be with Hayden Christensen, and there's a 19-year gap that we have, which is a plethora of stories they could tell. The thing that I'm looking forward to the most with this show is potentially seeing flashbacks of Clone Wars stuff and seeing Hayden and Ewan in their Clone Wars armor. I think it's gonna go that way. It's gonna be his day-to-day on Tatooine. You might see Qui-Gon. We might see him learning Force Ghost, and then we'll see him obviously protecting Luke and dealing with the Marauders and Cartel, going to Luke's birthdays and then being shunned by Uncle Owen. Yeah, most of it is going to be his time on Tatooine. That much has been confirmed.
There's an Obi-Wan book, and it is not canon. It's part of Legends, but it was written by John Jackson Miller, if I'm not mistaken, and it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
the
just
Life
like
and Legend is it?
Yeah, it's a Legends book for sure. But it's about his time on Tatooine, and he's dealing with what happened. Hopefully we'll actually get more. I hate to say hoping, but there's a lot of like PTSD moments, and I think we'll get more of that because that book was written before the Clone Wars was written. And so we'll see more of how he felt about Anakin, how much he loved his brother, his younger brother, and how he feels that he failed him. So that's just one aspect of it. But in that book, we actually get a bunch of different type of conflicts. He's been a warrior his entire life, and in that book, he watches a group of settlers, have to go through this conflict with sand people, with gangsters from the Hutts within their own ranks, and he's protecting this lovely young girl named I want to say Annabelle, Anna Lee, something like that. And I apologize for mistaking it, but this book explains why he has to not be a protector of the downtrodden. It exposes him too much, and if he gets too exposed, he can't do his duty of taking care of Luke. It also introduces Plug Eye, who is an amazing character. It's the leader of the Warriors of the Sand People. She is notable by one of her eyes is a gem. They call her Plug Eye, and she's a total badass. She is canon. She was made canon by the From a Certain Point of View, A New Hope book. And so we know that from that book, we know elements of that story is going to be made canon. So I'm a big fan of that. There's just a lot of possibilities that I'm a big fan of. Hopefully, we also get the scene from the Ahsoka book, which is Obi-Wan going to Shmi's grave and apologizing because he wasn't able to take care of her son the way that Qui-Gon had promised. And it's such a sad moment and like a horrifying realization. And hopefully we also get elements of Claudia Gray's short story Master and Apprentice, not to be confused with her book Master and Apprentice, but she has a short story called that In From a Certain Point of View, which is Qui-Gon's Force Ghost appearing to Obi-Wan, giving him encouragement, talking to him, even though Qui-Gon's Force Ghost knows. Because when you're Force Ghost, you're part of the cosmic force, and time is commingled, right? It's all happening at the same time. So he knows that Obi-Wan is going to join him in the Force very soon, but he can't tell him that. Hopefully we'll see some of that in there as well. There's a lot of things I want to see, but I think they got it. I trust them.
Max Streaks asks, how is Vader able to talk to Momin? I thought Sith couldn't exist after death like Jedi.
He was talking to Momin, but you'll notice there's a very specific thing that he has to do in order to talk to Momin. That's to put Momin's helmet on top of someone else's head. So while if you're in the light side, you can become a Force Ghost and retain your consciousness as part of the cosmic force. That's only on the light side. Dark side members don't get that privilege. If you're on the dark side, you can't go back. you have to attach your consciousness to something. Moment, it's the helmet. But
it's a lot of masks on the dark side.
It's usually masks.
Yeah. So I mean, just to add on to that, Mustafarians are attacking. Vader takes one of them, puts Momin's mask on him, and Momin's consciousness takes over. And that's how, he's speaking to Momin.
Which is wildly different than Obi-Wan talking into Luke's ear while he's flying, than, him appearing on Dagobah, brushing aside branches and sitting on the log. It's different than Yoda appearing to Luke and using lightning to strike down that tree. Anyone on the dark side, we've only seen them have to be attached to a specific object, and Momin's goal was to regain his ability to interact. Momin was trying to trick Vader to regain that ability.
Yeah.
That leads credence to the fact that dark side users just don't have it.
Why Thanks Friend asks, what do you think will be changed in hypothetical remastered versions of the sequel trilogy a few decades from now?
First of all, why thanks, friend. If you are who I'm thinking, thank you for making your content, and I love your coverage of the books. I think Elements already mentioned that before, but as soon as I saw you, I was like, okay, all right, this is one of my peoples. I need, yeah.
She needs to be on high ground too.
You're awesome. But as far as what they could do for further coverage of the sequels, so a lot of times, I get a lot of complaints about the sequels, and most of them amount to cognitive dissonance. Yep. Either someone was expecting to see something and didn't see it, or they weren't expecting something and refused to see it. The third option is they don't like what they're seeing, so they don't pay attention to what's happening. So the vast majority of complaints are things that are explained in the films themselves. But I could see them adding some emphasis. So, for instance, I get people saying, how come Rey was able to defeat Kylo Ren on Starkiller Base? Obviously, we know that she was a skilled combatant already in melee weaponry. And we also know that Kylo Ren wasn't trying to defeat her. He could have several times. He held her to a cliff and tried to recruit her.
Yeah.
And he was also bleeding out. We had a whole Chekhov's gun thing. There's so many reasons. But they could add more. They don't. I don't think they need to, but they could add more. But just emphasis. There's so many parts of the story where people and I wanna also emphasize that now that I've become a Star Wars creator and now have access to talking to far more Star Wars fans than I did before, most of us don't need it. But there are people that need more context on certain things, and I can see that being added.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm in agreement with you 100%. I think if they were to do a theoretical special edition, they have to start doing some extended cuts. You could use a lot of cutscenes. That's for sure.
Rey's third lesson on Act 2, which was shot and everything, it just was cut from the film for time.
We would just love to see Rey training more. Like a lot of training montages, just you can show that to us, man. It's not a waste of time.
I think they assumed that because we saw more of Rey training or doing things that indicated that she would know what to do than any other protagonist. I think they assumed that we would assume that she could do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, they were mistaken. And I guess I need even more proof or whatever, but I could see them going against that.
Just a couple more questions. Let's make this like a lightning round. Stanley Kelly asks, who's your favorite character of all time in any Star Wars series, comic, or movie? Steel Sean.
Jaina Solo, Sword of the Jedi. She's a boss.
Xavier Wells Ford de Barrel asks, do you think Boba will die in Mando Season 2? No.
No, he'll be the antagonist of Season 3. And I will die on that hill.
I agree with that. As if we didn't have to reiterate this point, Nico Tuna asks, since Jango is a foundling, are he and Boba considered Mandalorians? No.
A foundling is not a Mandalorian. A Mandalorian is a Mandalorian. When you grow out of being a foundling, you get to decide whether you become a Mandalorian or go do your own thing.
Absolutely. Final question. Bwahahaha2 asks, do you think there should be a single-player Mandalorian video game? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We need a lot more single-player everything in Star Wars. Like, I mean, I get the multiplayer thing, but we need, like, Jedi Fallen Order was awesome.
So here's the thing, is the game industry has been against single-player games because multiplayer games have been selling. However, Jedi Fallen Order blew past everything that they had imagined far and away. Like it was an incredibly received game, high quality, great marks overall. And so at the very last shareholders meeting, EA said that they would be doubling down on Star Wars video games. Considering the success of Fallen Order, that means we're going to get more.
Definitely, I know you want your mixed GTA-esque or mixed GTA game. I definitely, built off of that. Was like, Red Dead Redemption style with Dash Rendar or something. But we definitely need a lot more single player games.
So I know I said I wanted it GTA style before, and there was a mistake. And I said that because I had not ever played Skyrim. I literally just started Skyrim. I've even moved off of it, but just from what I know, that's actually the style that I want.
Yeah.
But I need that in a Star Wars video game, and I already have a whole game like largely written out. So EA, if you're watching this, let me know. I will make you money. I promise.
Just go to GDC with me and prepare your elevator pitch.
Oh, it's prepared. I have it forward, backwards, and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, that's the perfect vehicle for Star Wars. Like the Elder Scrolls series, but yeah, of course, Skyrim in general is just the perfect template for taking an avatar and kind of throwing them into the world and letting them decide what they're going to be.
What's your video game pitch?
My video game pitch is practically the same thing with like more of the mechanics of Red Dead Redemption in a more kind of narratively restricted linear approach. Skyrim is more kind of open-ended, player decides what story happens, whereas Skyrim is player-driven narrative, and Red Dead Redemption and games like that are narrative-driven players. So mine would be kind of like the juxtaposition to yours in a way, but adjacent almost. Like it's an open world RPG, but there's this linear story and you're on rails with it, and you're kind of, doing the RPG, like playing the Dash Rendar type of character or Kyle Katarn, and you're in this story that's unfolding and you're experiencing the story. But of course with like Red Dead Redemption mechanics, Fallen Order, melee mechanics, just a mix of, I don't have time to write a GDD on podcast, but definitely that direction. And then obviously yours is more like the player decides the story that happens right through his gameplay.
Yeah, yes and no. Because I did get a question on like, oh, how could your game be canon? No, I do want only one through line story. But in and of that, you would have to reach a certain level of notoriety, depending on if you went legit routes or non-legit routes, in order to access certain information or have access to certain people and things like that. But real quick, let me at least test out my elevator pitch. Okay. All right. Elevator pitch. So you are one of 8 of the Empire's elite of elite commandos. Now, each one has their own specialty, from electronics to politics. But as a team, if they're having resistance on this planet, you drop these 8 people behind enemy lines, give them 2 weeks to a month, and you'll have that planet. Like that's the level. Now, after Operation Cinder, half of them defect. You're part of that half, right? And you are Kyle Katarn. Yeah, if you know Kyle Katarn, you know that he's force sensitive, but he doesn't know it to begin with. He's just a trooper, and that's part of the narrative. If you choose to go around and try to uncover all the force sensitive areas, temples, things like that, books, you can actually start to level up that skill, but it's not necessary for the game at all. So you can complete this solely as a soldier. But you and 3 other defect. One can become a member of a crime syndicate, one can become a high-level smuggler, and all this stuff. You get to choose how you play through the game. You can join the Smugglers Guild and rise your way up through the ranks till you get to that guy and take him down. Bounty hunter, spice runner, whatever. But you need to take down your other cohorts in order to find the whereabouts of the 4 that didn't defect. You end up finding out that the 4 that didn't defect just landed on Coruscant. You know, if you give these guys a month, they will overturn the government of the Republic. You have that time period to figure out where they are, what they're doing, what their plan is, and get things back on the right track. And that's the whole game. Like, that's what I want.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot mixed in there. There's Skyrim. There's, of course, GTA. But there's also a mix of Far Cry in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I can definitely see it. But I'm going to leave it to you guys.
There'll be one solid through line that gets you through. And so any other media has to only refer to the through line. They don't have to refer to the nitty gritty. You can play the game however you want and become expert level smuggler or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we could do what they did for KOTOR and those games. I believe there was consensus on which endings were canon, at least canon in the Legends or EU continuity. And I think like KOTOR was like the light side ending that was consistent with the continuity at that time. But you could always kind of, prescribe that at least with your through line, like what exactly happens, like the fate of that person, when you don't have to prescribe his smuggler or Jedi or whatever. It's just like what he does. But I'll leave it to you guys. You guys can be the executives at EA, Ubisoft, and all of the game companies out there. Leave it in the comment section down below. Would you invest? Would you invest in Darth Chaco's elevator pitch? What do you have a title for this game?
The Hammer of Malar. I don't know. I really don't.
Katarn.
Beginnings of the Force. And Kyle Katarn is one of the people that Luke starts his Jedi temple with. However, Katarn is more interested in finding more artifacts and is off exploring. And we cannot. That means that we have another Force sensitive that's just off, lost in the galaxy somewhere in the future.
Yeah. I
want more thoughts from the viewers and people on TikTok and things like that to bounce ideas off of, because it's been awesome and a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Leave your questions, of course, and comments in the section below. We have a lot of fun answering your guys' questions. A lot of times y'all think of things like the Zephospheres that we haven't thought about. I did get a question earlier that I answered via TikTok about Ahsoka Silka beads on her waist. But definitely interact with us, engage with us on this podcast. Ask your questions in the comment section. Engage with us on TikTok as well. For sure, we will try our best to answer as many questions as possible. But in the event that we cannot, we will most certainly try to kind of offload the questions onto the podcast. And we can go from there. Final words, Chaco.
Everyone is a true fan. And if there's things that you don't know, characters you don't know, storylines you don't know, ask us. And if a bunch of people are asking for the same thing, we will make content on that. That's why we make content. It's
Absolutely.
Not because, it's... Let us know what you want and we'll give that to you, and that's why we are here.
Absolutely, and you are no less of a fan if you have to ask that question. But this is the end of Dyad in the Force episode 5. On to the next one. May the Force be with you.
Always.